Hey, this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishor from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at Veggie Diplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 47 of India Rising, Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishor, a show in which we analyze the happenings from around the world and their impact on India. It's been a while since we have recorded anything, and we are back with a very important topic to discuss upon, and that is the return of Donald Trump to the White House. As soon as he returned to the White House, there were two important meetings which were of significance to India. The first one was the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visiting Washington D.C. on an important bilateral visit, and immediately after that we had a visit from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to Washington D.C. So what we are planning to do today is to cover both of them one after the other and check what's the impact of both of these on India. So, Mohal, let's get started and begin with the Modi-Trump meeting.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if you want to talk about how the meeting itself went ahead, and then we can look at the ramifications.
Yeah, so on February 13th, Prime Minister Modi visited Washington for a bilateral visit with President Trump. There were apprehensions, even though they had good rapport in the past during the first term when President Trump was in office, that there would be some contentious issues such as tariffs. But the meeting went well, and there were some significant outcomes. Like one of them was that Tawahu Rana, who is a key accused in the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, US has agreed to extradite him to India. The meeting was pursued well, not only in diplomatic and strategic circles, but also in media circles. CNN, who we know is no fan of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, called it, and I quote, a masterclass for other leaders around the world on how to walk into a negotiation with Trump to achieve the best possible outcome, end quote. So, what the government of India had done preemptively was that in the yearly budget in India that gets presented in 1st of February, there have
Right.
been reductions in tariffs on certain items such as Harley Davidson motorcycles and duck meat. I mean, some obscure items, but still some meat on the bone for the Trump admin to see that there was some action being taken by India in terms of tariffs, because as we know that tariffs is a big issue in Trump the Trump for foreign policy, and it would be a point of contention down the road. There have been some reports that Trump might also ask to buy more oil from the US. I mean, India is heavily dependent on Russian oil, so it might also help out US exporters and also India. But like India, since it's getting a huge discount on Russian oil, it'll be interesting to see if it comes into fruition of buying US oil. There, I mean, US does. I mean, there was some anxiety that there could have been awkward moments at the meeting, given that Trump had just called for reciprocal tariffs on nations that impose tariffs. And Trump has previously derided India as the tariff king in the past. So there was a lot of apprehension that the meeting might be a dud and there might not be a very positive, and I mean, there might be hostile reception to Prime Minister Modi. But the meeting went quite well. I mean, Trump loves being flattered, as we know, and showered with praise. And Modi did come up with, mind you, some awkward sounding acronyms, that MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, plus MEGA, which is Make India Great Again, uh, can together uh, be uh, construed as like mega progress for both nations. So there was some, uh, I mean, you can say like slightly cringeworthy like acronyms flowing, but that was the flowery praises were to keep Trump in good spirits, and he does enjoy like a good rapport. I mean, he did visit India just before the 2020 COVID pandemic and the end of his term, and Modi also did visit to quite a few times to US, and you could see the good bonhomie between the two leaders across the meeting. I mean, US does understand that India is still the best bet for US to avoid a war with China. So there is lot of consensus not only on Capitol Hill, with both Democrats and Republicans agreeing to a closer strategic and friendship with India. Mind you, US, I mean, India, like we do know that India are not going to be part of any military alliance like NATO, but it could be uh, like a like short of a military alliance. India is willing to do step up its friendship with the US. However, there does remain a risk that the Trump being the perennial deal maker, he could set of have some sort of modus vivendi with China, where they could have some agreements with China and they ease up the pressure, which we don't know how it will end up, right? Because if China sees less pressure from the US, then it might amp up the pressure to against India, and it could start being more antagonistic against India. Like for now, interestingly, like the I think recently we have heard that the direct flights, Kishore, I think have resumed between India and China, and also the Mansoor, the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra has resumed after a period of 4 or 5 years. So there have been a lot of, I mean, the border tensions have been eased up, but we don't know. I think there was some speculation in some quarters that basically US wanted to get ready for a new reset with Trump, and that's why they wanted to make peace with India for the time being. I mean, China, you can never trust them uh, in the long run, because they are always they are break their promises and go back on their word. But at least for the short term, they might be reorienting to focus more on Trump. But yeah, if Trump has some sort of deal with China, then things could go downhill with China on the LAC. So yeah, there's a lot of to wait and watch on how the things unfold between this uh, triangle between the three two great powers and another regional power in India.
Yeah, okay.
Kishore?
So, yeah, you brought up a good point about China, and I have a few points to talk about there. First thing
Mm-hmm.
was about China. There was this BRICS summit that was about to happen, and Modi and Xi Jinping would come face to face. So they had to kind of agree on a deal before
Mm-hmm.
they would
Yeah.
come face to face. So
Mm-hmm.
the border issue had to be kind of sorted out to both leaders' satisfaction. So they had to come out with that, and that is why we had announcements that direct flights would resume. Mansarovar, Kailash Mansarovar Yatra also would resume this year. So that is something that went ahead with or without Trump coming to power. But anyway, that indeed is a good point in terms of India being the best bet for the US to avoid war with China. Now, with regards to India-US bilateral ties. You brought up a good point about Tahawur Rana. Trump openly offering to give away Tahawur Rana. Now, additionally, there were enough noise being made even before Modi flew in to Washington D.C. that India kind of agreed with Trump's position that there were a lot of illegal immigration happening from India into the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So the Indian administration kept telling that, yes, we agree that there may be illegal immigrants and we are ready to take them back. So I think the stage was set in terms of some kind of a conciliatory note from the Indian administration telling if you have problems, we are willing to and ready to look at them. And also, ensure that things can be worked out. And we also had one or two plane load of illegal immigrants being sent back to India. Now, Mohal, you want to talk about that point?
Yeah, so I mean, the immigrants who were the illegal immigrants from US who were sent back to India, they were sent back in chains, and there was a lot of
Mm,
uproar over the appalling state or conditions in which they were brought back to India in chains on aircraft. So we raised a lot of, and there were a lot of hue and cry among political leaders and many in India. But interestingly, if you keep that aside, I think what was interesting is that when the deportation started from the US to various countries, including India. Many nations, like especially in Latin America or Central America, they had lot of there was a lot of objections and lot of um resistance in those countries to accepting these illegal immigrants back. However, as you mentioned, like India was kind of as was a different approach that they were willing to take back them,
right.
no questions asked. So that was a contrast in the how India handled this situation versus them. I mean, mind you, the shackling of Indians that would have been taken up by the Ministry of External Affairs with the US counterparts for sure, but that like which could have been possibly avoided, but India was willing to take back, and I think that also eased up a lot of possible tension between uh, India and US. Kishore.
Now, yeah, of course, but I think the devil also lies in the details, right? So if India is willing to tell the United States that we are definitely against illegal immigration, now it also sets the tone for a future hard stance to be taken by the Indian administration, telling that if you are not okay with illegal immigration, we are also not okay with illegal immigration, and therefore we would want to deport any and all illegal Bangladeshis who may have entered into India, and therefore we would not want you to tell us what to do with those people other than sending them back to Bangladesh. So I think it also sets a very important uh, uh, foundation on how illegal immigration needs to be handled by the Modi administration if and when they want to pick it up. So I think in that regard, this is a key concession by the Modi administration. You also brought up a good point about the American countries not agreeing to deportation of the illegal immigrants initially. So that kind of set a very a rough first few weeks in the Trump administration when their first topic was about sending those people back. Anyway, now the other point that you also wanted to talk about was the Khalistani elements, Mohal, uh, in terms of India telling them that they were not happy with the earlier U.S. administration trying to safeguard or trying to protect those Khalistani elements. So I think Modi also brought that up for discussion with Trump. And US, of course, the new US administration has kind of listened to India and is willing to possibly tell that, okay, we are not going to go very hard on the Khalistani issue, and we are okay if you want to tackle them in a different way. So I think that was another point where Modi got more than what he asked for. So I think it was overall a very good situation to be in. It was not a completely win-lose situation where Trump won everything, Modi lost everything. I think it was far more balanced, far more nuanced. And the best part was even Shashi Tharoor applauding the Indian government's achievement, wherein he said, I'm happy that the government has been able to extract so much out of its meeting with Trump. Mohal?
Yeah, I mean, Shashi Tharoor. I mean, this is more about domestic politics and geopolitics. He did get into quite a bit of hot water with those, with the praise of Prime Minister Modi and his visit.
Mhm.
But when there's praise coming from like opposition leaders, you know that it was not a disaster as some have been predicting, and it
True.
did quite go well. Uh, I mean, though the funny part is that Shashi Tharoor did end up in trouble with his own party leaders who
Mm.
seem to disapprove of the statement. But anyways, so Kishore, next, do you want to go over some of the key takeaways from the joint statement between US and India post this
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah, I think that's important. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go through the key takeaways, and we'll see if we can add any nuanced opinion on that. Okay, so initially, I think the joint statement was full of announcements of new initiatives and some catchy acronyms. Mohal, I think somehow this administration and the Modi administration, they're fan of acronyms. So the first one among them was about something called a US-India Compact, which apparently seems to be a new framework for partnership, emphasizing cooperation in trade, technology, and defense, and
Yeah,
which
so
apparent.
CAT
Mhm.
compact, just for the listeners, is, I mean, I don't know how they come up with this acronym. It's catalyzing opportunities for military partnership, accelerated commerce and technology. I mean, one of the things is like how many hours do these policy mandarins really spend to come up to fit something, to an acronym. Some of them seem like a bit like forced, to
Of
in
course.
terms of grammar and language.
Yeah, I mean, one thought that comes to my mind, they're not just good crossword puzzle solvers, but possibly they are themselves crossword puzzle makers. So I
Hmm.
know possibly they know where to fit in what word, try to
Hmm.
make it into a meaningful word. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that is the correct acronym for compact. But yeah, I think this is just building on the 2 decade long improvement in ties that we are seeing, and hopefully this time around they will take trade, tech, and defense to greater heights. Now, along with the compact, they also announced a new initiative, Autonomous Systems Industrial Alliance, and this one, again acronymed Asia, to scale industrial partnership and production in the Indo-Pacific. Additionally, they also announced the launch of US-India Trust, and trust here refers to transforming the relationship utilizing strategic technology, which apparently will catalyze government to government, academia, and private sector collaboration to promote application of critical and emerging technologies in areas like defense, AI, semiconductors, quantum technology, biotechnology, energy, and space, while of course encouraging the use of verified technology vendors and ensuring sensitive technologies are protected. So I
So,
think,
you can read between the lines when they say use of verified technology vendors. I think no Huawei, I guess for sure. Like
no Huawei,
keeping the
of course.
Chinese, keeping the Chinese vendors like Huawei away from this.
Right, right. So I think what they've done here, they've come up with many initiatives. Uh, Details need to be added in. So I think that will be the work of the diplomats at on both sides. So these diplomats will keep meeting, trying to iron out all differences, trying to add more details into these. So I think we will continue to hear more and more about these, and we can talk about them later when we get more details. But for now, these are more at the initiative declaration level. Additionally, we'll move on quickly. They also set a new goal for bilateral trade, which seems to be quite bold, where they claim that they gave a new name called Mission 500, aiming to have more than aiming to double the total bilateral trade to upwards of $500 billion by 2030, which is hardly what 4 or 5 years away. So I think this is quite bold, and this will play well for Trump because he can go back and tell that I was able to increase trade with India and possibly also have reduce the trade deficit with India. So I think that way, this will augur well for Trump domestically, and even for India, this will help simply because of all the defense level partnerships. So I think
Yeah, but
that
like
is,
also Trump is also not happy with the deficit with
mhm.
India, so he wants to lower the deficit with India. That's why he wants to. So this can be like kind of a double-edged sword where he could push India to buy more stuff
Of
in the
course. So
future.
that is where defense will come in. Any major meaningful defense purchase will obviously be advantageous for the United States.
Hmm.
Yeah. So additionally, there was also some kind of a mutually beneficial multi-sector bilateral trade agreement announcement by the fall of 2025. So this was uh, a very small paragraph in the joint statement, but this caught my attention. So I don't know what multi-sector bilateral trade agreement would be, BTA. Mind you, they did not use the word FTA. They did not use the word free trade agreement.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is quite interesting. We will need to watch out for in the next few months.
Yeah, but they just said like first tranche, so they know that it's going to be a hard slog to
Hmm.
agree because there are a lot of tariffs on, especially on the Indian side. So I mean, this could be like very tiny in the grand scheme of things, but they just want to get at least some bilateral trade agreements by this fall.
I mean, knowing how Babus in Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Commerce work, I don't want this to become another GST Council meeting where they keep talking about every individual item that is sold in India and decide at what percentage should it be taxed. So I don't
Yeah.
want the same kind of attitude or same strategy to be employed in the bilateral trade agreement discussion with the U.S.
Hmm.
administration.
Hmm.
Anyway, so United States, on their part, apparently they have welcomed India's recent measures to lower tariffs on US products, like, for example, bourbon whiskey, motorcycles, Harley Davidson, Mohal that you mentioned, ICT products and metals, duck meat, alfalfa hay, medical devices, agricultural products from the US, so on and so forth. And on the other hand, India also expressed appreciation for US measures taken to enhance exports of Indian mangoes and pomegranates to the United States. So I think that way these are not sizable, but definitely important to set the ball rolling. Mohal?
Yeah. Also, like they announced a commitment to fully realize uh, the US India 123 civil nuclear agreement that was agreed between then President George Bush and Indian Prime Minister, former Prime Minister uh, Manmohan Singh.
Mm,
So at that time, there was a lot of hope that India would start investing in nuclear energy in India, but due to the nuclear civil liability law, which was very strenuous, most US companies, including Westinghouse, didn't want to build anything, but now they want to work together to build like US designed nuclear reactors through possible some through localization and possible technology transfer. So more to see like what happens in the future. Also, the leaders plan to convene partners from the IMEC or the India Middle East Europe corridor, the and the I2U2 group, which is like India, Israel, United States, and United Arab Emirates within the next
mhm.
6 months to announce new
Right.
initiatives for 2025. Now, this was kind of dead in the water after the events of October 7th and the Hamas strike on Israel, terrorist strike on Israel. So that was probably, I think this was announced probably just maybe a few months before that. So maybe this
Yes.
is a good thing that this is being talked up again now that there would be a possible ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. So maybe they can revive this corridor. Also, there was some talk about India US Space Cooperation with plans for NASA and ISRO effort to bring the first Indian astronaut aboard the International Space Station. Um, so basically, this all shows the signals that the Trump administration is keen to work around the possible tension point on issues like tariffs and export controls, while building up the relationship even more. Kishore?
I think we've covered all these. But one additional thing that I wanted to point out was
Mm-hmm.
Modi was one of the first world leaders to be invited to Washington D.C. Even within the Quad group, we did not have Japanese Prime Minister or the Australian Prime Minister.
But did
Uh,
the Japanese Prime Minister visit before him, I guess?
I don't think so. What I read within Indian media was that Modi was the first world leader to visit. So I think
Okay.
that kind of
No,
underlined
I
or
think
underscored the importance that US
no, I
would
think he
accord
was
to
the
Indian
second,
ties.
Kishore. I think
Hmm.
in the first week of February, the Prime Minister did visit with Donald Trump. So this was, but yeah, he was one of the uh, very first leaders to meet with Trump. I think the only other ones were who has Trump has met personally in the White House has been the Prime Minister of UK, Starmer,
Hmm.
Prime Minister Ishiba. I think it was like in first week of February, and I think Modi met him just a week later. But the meeting which went but those meetings, some of them haven't went well compared to the Prime Minister Modi's trip.
Right. Also, the loud discussions or the loud noises that came out just before the Trump Modi meeting. Right. There was huge talk
Mhm.
about tariffs. Indian markets were tanking that day in fear
Mhm.
of what tariffs would bring. And
Mhm.
amidst all that backdrop, I think this meeting was a huge boost to the
Mhm. Mhm.
bilateral ties. Yeah, okay. So I think we can quickly move on to the Ukraine topic, Mohal.
Yeah, so on February 28th, um, basically, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, he wanted to visit the US to meet President Trump and sign some kind of security agreement, uh, and make some kind of concessions to end the war.
Hmm.
Uh, Now, Zelensky has not had a good relationship with Trump because Trump has wanted Ukraine to make quite a bit of concessions to Russia to swiftly end the war. So there was a lot of tension even before the visit started.
Right.
So the Trump administration intended to initially cancel the Zelensky's trip. There were reports beforehand, but was persuaded by French President Emmanuel Macron to proceed with it. What Trump being the deal maker, consumer deal maker, he wanted something, his pound of flesh for the U.S. supporting the uh, the Ukrainians in the war, and the only thing they could come up with, I think this was something that was spoken in vague terms during even the Biden administration, was raw minerals. So
Correct.
for the rare earth minerals to be mined from Ukraine and US, since they have a stake in it, they would be compensated in a some way, shape, or form. So the agreement was that they would sign a framework of an agreement when Zelensky was in DC.
Hmm.
Prior to the meeting, there are reports that Lindsey Graham, who has been very pro-Ukrainian in his stance, had told Zelensky to focus on the agreement and discuss a ceasefire later. Now, the meeting between the two leaders started cordially, but roughly into the 40 minutes into the meeting, I mean, the wheels started coming off. So Vance basically was hinting that that for 4 years, like under Biden administration, he just talked tough, but while Putin invaded the country, he couldn't do anything. But now they're going to try diplomacy. Now Zelensky uh, took umbrage to this statement from Vice President JD Vance that there was sort of no kind of diplomacy, and he brought up the point that Russia had agreed to uh, certain agreements with Ukraine in the past, which they have violated flagrantly. So Zelensky got upset and in a condescending manner said like, what kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? At this point, I think the conversation became hostile and like continuously escalated. So Vance was like saying like diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of Ukraine, and said that it was disrespectful to come into the Oval Office to litigate in front of the American media, and this whole spectacle was being recorded on the media, which is quite kind of surprising. That usually after like the first 2-3 minutes, many times the media is shooed away, and like
Exactly.
this kind of tough negotiations happen away from the glare of the media. So it was kind of interesting that how uh, this was all, the media was always present, and I think it just became like a kind of a shouting match, and there was a lot of back and forth. And I think by the time the meeting was done, I think there was a complete break in relationship. I think it looked like if for the first 40 minutes, even though Trump and Zelensky and had their differences, they were ha- they were biting their tongue just to get the agreement done. But once these differences came apart, I think everything just spiraled out of control.
Hmm.
And I think at the end, they didn't even sign the agreement. I think Trump called off the meeting to sign the agreement. Even there was like reports that the lunch that was being prepared for the Ukrainian delegation was eaten by the White House staffers themselves.
Yeah,
And I think the agreement was off, and like Trump like just went to Mar-a-Lago, his
immediately after
Florida,
that. Yeah, yeah.
immediately the next day, and Zelensky went to, I know he went to UK and he got some kind of assurances, but the whole deal just fell apart completely.
Yeah, I think this did not go well in terms of optics. Uh, yeah, so let's also talk about the overall impact on the war and how efforts of Marco Rubio uh, will now pan out. Yeah, so Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he clearly stated that the Ukrainians had insisted on a Washington visit, with the deal not yet on the table. They were quite in a hurry. Far from being left out, there had at least been 10 days of negotiations and repeated conversations. Zelensky, however, chose to take on the US president and his team in a diatribe that was unnecessary as it was counterproductive. Clearly and unsurprisingly, Zelensky was playing to the gallery. Now, according to some sources close to him, tempers had flared even before the event had begun. The Ukrainian president was apparently presented with the minerals for security agreement by the Trump administration. This was prior to the press meet, but the deal included no security guarantees to protect Ukraine from another Russian invasion. So clearly, Zelensky wanted future commitments from US, which Trump would not want to promise right away.
Yeah, and then I think it's important to remember that Zelensky has very little leverage in the situation. I mean,
Hmm.
if he gives away the minerals deal without any hard security guarantees, it was going to be like he would have nothing left in the bag to negotiate in the future. So that's why he was trying to stay put for the security guarantees. But anyways, continue, Kishore.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Simply because when you come over, you would want to protect your biggest offer or whatever you have to offer, and try
Mm-hmm.
to extract the most from the other party. So Zelensky was just trying to do that. Unfortunately for him, the entire meet went downhill. Now, immediately after that, you said that he went to the UK, to London, and he got a better reception. He got Keir Starmer listening to him. So I think the Europeans are now trying to come out with an alternate plan. They are willing to talk to Trump and make sure that the Ukraine issue is not put on the back burner, so to speak. Now, Trump has clearly told that he would not want to discuss this with Zelensky right away. and that Zelensky can come back whenever he is ready. Although Zelensky kept telling that same evening that he was willing to go back and continue the discussion. So I think US would want to put Ukraine on the back burner for now, and it will have to Zelensky to make amends and try to extract whatever he can from the US as early as possible. Uh, Mohal, you also want to talk about the sympathy factor for Ukraine and how that is losing currency?
Yeah, I think in the US, a lot of Republicans, especially,
Mm-hmm.
there is very little sympathy. I think they have a lot of money has been spent. By some estimates, it's like around 100 to 140 billion, 120 to 140 billion. Now, interestingly, many of the US money has been sent in form of there's a BBC article where it's grants, which is kind of there's no expectation the money is going to be asked back. But the Europeans who said they have sent more money is kind of loans. A lot of the money is loans. I'm not sure if they're going to be asking to recoup the money in some way, shape, or form, because unless Ukraine gets rebuilt, it would be very hard for the Europeans to see their money back. I mean, what Trump has been trying to do is like get the Europeans to spend a larger amount of NATO, and this was even preceding the war in Ukraine, that just having, and then to spend more on the defense, and especially after his claims of trying to buy Greenland, like Denmark, for example, has boosted his defense spending. Just today, we saw this article there. Germany, the chancellor in waiting, Friedrich Merz, said that they would amend the constitution to exempt defense and security outlays from the limits on fiscal spending. And there was some talk about spending 500 billion euros on infrastructure front to invest in priorities such as transportation, energy, and even defense. So I think Europe is finally waking up to the realization that they need to spend way more on defense. I think this has been a criticism from the American counterparts for quite some time, but nobody has been as vocal as Trump, that they
Mm-hmm.
need to be spending at least 2 to 2.5% on defense, and now they see that they are kind of being I mean, they have enjoyed the US security umbrella and not spending enough on defense. I mean, they have been able to divert more money towards like social welfare, which is good for its citizens. But now the chickens have come to roost per se, and they need to spend way more on defense to ensure that they have some kind of deterrence against a much larger foe in uh, Russia. So that's the angle from the US and the European side. Um, Also, like there have been, Trump has ruled out the boots on the ground strategy. Now,
Of
UK and
course, yeah.
France both have offered troops as peacekeepers with a multinational force, but I'm not sure if one, Russia is going to agree to it. There were some rumors or chat that it might be some third party nations which are neither from the west nor from Russia, so might be somebody like India or China or like African countries as peacekeepers. But for peacekeepers, or some kind of ceasefire agreement has to be in place, and whether it be European or non-European peacekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is that also Zelensky is bringing up, like, terms of security agreement. What's the agreement that US might not, the Russians might not invade again. So one of the hedges that what the Trump administration has been saying out is that if there is US investment in a minerals deal in Ukraine, then if US interests are going to be attacked with uh, a future Russian invasion again, then US has stakes on the ground literally to not allow that to happen. Because,
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, at this point you can pretty much rule out like some kind of military alliance or like NATO membership for Ukraine, because I think the whole war, I mean, what many people have misunderstood, the whole war was not to grab Ukraine per se completely, because it would have been an enormous task, but just to bring Ukraine down on its knees by Putin to ensure that they never become a NATO member. This was the goal all along. So uh, I mean, yeah, so the peacekeepers will be an interesting part. Like if some security agreement can be done. I mean, you the Europeans will not. agree to any kind of boots on the ground in terms of a fighting our combined army against the Russians in Ukraine. I mean, they let Ukrainians fight and unfortunately die, but it will be very hard for. I mean, even there's not unanimous agreement among the EU members of whether to put boots on the ground or not. And if that's the case, it would be hard that without US aid, the Ukrainians can keep fighting. I think they will have to give up probably the Donbass and the Luhansk regions to Russia as part of a peace agreement. But the main thing would be like, what kind of peacekeeping force could we have to
Mm,
maintain the peace between the two sides, and what kind of minerals could be extracted by the US side from there. And last but not least, one more point to bring up, like the contrast between the two meetings, which were like probably like I think like just 2 weeks apart, like the Modi Trump meeting. Now, granted, like Modi doesn't have a war with the US and Trump, but still, like Modi paid a salary and like he showered praises on Trump, while Zelensky, I mean, granted, he had very little negotiating tactic, and I mean, his country is under attack from Russia, no doubt, but he went about the meeting the wrong way, and I think it irked Trump to no end, well, because of which the deal was cancelled. But I mean, we understand to a point that he didn't want to lose his leverage by signing away the minerals for no security agreements. But still, he could have been deferential to Trump and Vance, even though he might have not agreed with their assessments. But I think I tweeted the other day that this meeting with Vance, Trump, and Zelensky should be played in every capital by every foreign policy uh, government official to their own heads of state, whether it be prime minister or president, just to show them like what not to do in terms of talking to Trump, like because this was like a horrible way. I mean, Trump is a does try to throw his weight around literally, and
yeah,
try to dictate the terms. So like you have to be patient and you can't be antagonistic to Trump and expect a good outcome, even though like people consider him a bully, which he might be. But this would not uh, give you good results in the end. So I think that Trump, Modi, and those meetings should be played out for all people's benefit, that how to deal with Trump. I mean, Modi, I'm sure like he will have a lot of disagreements with Trump, especially over tariffs and stuff, but he just bit his tongue and didn't want to bring up that issue because there are other ways and means of negotiating that around in some maybe lower level negotiations among the officials, and not just try to keep Trump in good spirits would be the
good step.
main
Yeah,
advice that everybody would be giving him.
good point.
Kishor.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Totally agree. Yeah, I think also the spectacular manner in which the meeting broke down, I think that sent shockwaves around the world. Whoever was at the receiving end of US money, US doles, US grants in the past decade or so will now be jittery in meeting Trump whenever their turn comes. And despite whatever background work, whatever homework folks like Marco Rubio may have done, when actually the time comes for the leader to go and meet Trump, Trump would not work on a set agenda. Trump would definitely want to put his mark on the meeting. So I think it becomes very tricky for any world leader to go to Washington D.C. and kind of uh, get the most out of the new U.S. administration. So definitely a good point that you made in terms of every world leader trying to understand how the dynamics work with Trump and his team and make sure that you don't come back empty-handed. Mohal?
Yeah, that is a correct point. That, and then it'll be interesting seeing the European and the US dynamics going forward, and what kind of, because now Putin knows he's in a very winning situation. So
Right.
what kind of negotiation? I mean, though Trump has just mentioned that he wants to use Putin to negotiate with the Iranians over the deal. And who knows, if he has good relationship with Modi, he might even try to leverage that relationship to negotiate with, let's say, the with Putin or Ukrainians or even the Iranians. So there are a lot of new possibilities or in the future. So very uncertain times for the world, especially the European US relationship, where it will go. The Europeans are very mad about it, but they can't do much about it at this
Hmm.
point. I mean, they have left their defense. I mean, as somebody rightly pointed out that they had the Europe is in deep trouble overall because they have uh, given up their energy security to Russia with natural gas. They gave up their economic security by exporting a lot of their businesses or manufacturing to China, and they exported their defense security by you having the US security umbrella to US. So they're kind of stuck in a no man's land, and
Hmm.
they have situation. I think they just have to wake up and smell the coffee that they will have to spend way more on defense going forward and not be heavily reliant on the United States and
Agree.
NATO.
Yeah, agree. And that you actually gave me a good segue. This exactly fits well to the Indian government's position that we are always in for strategic autonomy rather than aligning with any one or two world powers. And I think at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of pressure put on Indian diplomats whenever they went to
Mm-hmm.
different world
Yeah.
capitals, asking them, why are you not openly condemning the Russian action? And Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar repeatedly kept pointing out that we have a different worldview and
Mm-hmm.
we will stick by that. And although people called it monkey balancing, although people called it uh, some kind of fit for nothing kind of a policy, I think
Mm-hmm.
Indian administration now comes on top, and they are now in a better off position when
Yeah.
time is now ripe for
Yeah,
peace
there
talks.
was a lot of pressure through the media that how can India take a side of aggressor
Mm,
in Putin, and I think Jaishankar in one of his exchanges with media rightly said that Europe's problems are world's problems, but world's problems are not
well,
Europe's problems. So
exactly.
I think the neutrality that India face, and even like Prime Minister in the presence of Vladimir Putin said that this is not an era of war,
Mm,
which I think he has repeated since then. Even I think on the recent visit also he did mention that. So does come out looking way better than those days of early days of 2022 when there was a lot of media frenzy over India's not taking a side, but now it appears much wiser. Not only with the low energy prices that we have enjoyed in the past 2 years with Russia, but also that Trump's sudden U-turn where he's cozying up to the Russians. There, mind you, there are even some reports that they are looking to maybe take off some of the sanctions, which would be like unthinkable in the previous administration
mm, mm,
against the Russians. That like now India taking a neutral policy sounds way more pragmatic, for a lack of better term, than openly taking sides. And I think you currently pointed like this is what I think India has been trying to do since 1947, irrespective of who is in power,
yeah.
from all the way from Jawaharlal Nehru to Narendra Modi, that strategic autonomy is paramount. I mean, as the famous saying goes, right? There are no permanent enemies and there are no permanent friends. There are only permanent strategic interests, right? I mean,
Of
just
course.
imagine
Yeah.
like US voting recently in the UN General Assembly along with Russia on a resolution along with North Korea, right? So,
Mm.
uh, Kishore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that kind of sums up the situation that we find right now. Um, Trump administration has started off with a bang, pretty much literally. So I think we will continue to hear more about how the administration pans out in terms of looking at the various world issues that plague the world right now. So yeah, that brings us to the end, dear listeners. Wraps up today's episode. To continue hearing about such interesting topics, Do subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us. We would also like to hear from you if you have any suggestions on any topics that you would like us to cover. Do remember that these topics should be directly related to Indian foreign policy. Until the next episode, this is Mohal and Kishor signing off.